So the big issue in Australia at the moment is same-sex marriage. After a formal plebiscite was recently blocked by the Senate, and amid fierce debate on the issue, the government is conducting a postal vote to decide whether or not our marriage laws should be changed to include same-sex marriage. Now, I've got no objection to same-sex marriage. If two people want to get married, then I don't see why they shouldn't be able to, regardless of what's between their legs. I will, however, be voting no. Let me explain why.
The issue of protecting religious entities, and the argument that's being put forward that there's no legislation that actually shows at the moment that religious institutions will be protected.
Redefining marriage creates all sorts of vulnerabilities for the freedom of millions of Australians, not just professional clergy who might do weddings, but anyone who wants to speak and say out loud that they believe that marriage is exclusively between a man and a woman will need legal protection against the triggering of state-based anti-discrimination law. And we've already seen this with an archbishop, not as a result of his religious duty in a wedding ceremony, but simply because he exercised free speech to distribute Christian teaching on marriage. He was hauled before a tribunal. We're going to see a lot more of that, and that hasn't even been discussed. By those on the yes side. They have no solution.
Christine Forster, to that issue that Lyle does raise, there is a bit of a grey area here, a bit of opacity when it comes to anti-discrimination bodies at a state level. It's not quite clear whether Commonwealth legislation could actually override that.
That's a question for legislators to address. Yes. If there are concerns, then it's up to our parliamentarians to put private members' bill or other legislation together to address those concerns.
Well, yes, there are concerns. This fella from the Christian lobby just outlined his concerns. So isn't it reasonable to expect that we'd have a decent understanding of how they're going to be addressed before we make such fundamental changes to our marriage laws? In my opinion, our right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion is way too important to have any level of uncertainty over. And a yes vote at this point in time will mean uncertainty over freedom of religion, freedom of speech, as well as parental rights, as ex-Prime Minister John Howard explains. Australia's Safe School Coalition pushes radical left-wing sexual ideology dressed up as an anti-bullying program to over 300 Australian schools.
Download the Safe Schools material from the Victorian Government Education Department's own website. Material for Year 7s and Year 8s, and you will find this instruction to teachers. Quoting, invite students to imagine themselves in the role of a young person who is aged 16 years or older. Then tell students on the left-hand side of the room that their character is going out with someone of the same sex.
People worry about what their children are taught in the classroom in relation to gender theory. You know, there's been a lot of debate about the Safe Schools program, which has concerned an enormous number of parents now.
It's kind of sad that the Aussie Prime Minister and the American President aren't besties anymore. And it's at this point that I suddenly remember that I was making a video about same-sex marriage in Australia. So as I outlined before that little tangent, one of the main reasons I cannot vote yes is the legislative uncertainty surrounding freedom of expression that a yes result would give us. Instead of putting the cart before the horse, let's address these potential landmines before they can do any real damage to people's livelihoods. Now, the other reason I'm voting no also relates to freedom of expression, but it has less to do with the wording of legislation that gives us the legal right to express ourselves, and more to do with the spirit of free expression, the principle of tolerance that should be at the core of anyone who values their own ability to freely express themselves.
What I found stressful, and I find this stressful, the negative rhetoric towards the LGBTQI community. I always think, imagine before Sorry Day, some group started putting out racist pamphlets. You put them to jail. And some of those things in those pamphlets are wrong and so offensive. We should be putting all those people that have printed those things in jail. It is offensive beyond belief, making me feel... I'm embarrassed to be Australian right now.
I'm kind of embarrassed that you're Australian right now as well. Not that it would make a difference, but I noticed you're not holding up any highly offensive pamphlets grotesque enough to jail people over. It kinda makes you seem about as intolerant as the cretinous fuck down in Hobart who felt justified for headbutting one of our federal ministers for having the wrong opinion.
Hey, Tony, I turned around, there was a chap wearing a Vote Yes badge. He says, I want to shake your hand. I went over to shake his hand and then he headbutted me. Now, he wasn't very good at it, I've got to say.
And then there was the girl in Canberra who instantly lost her job for having the wrong opinion.
Well, as you know, on Facebook, you can put a filter on your profile photo and it will say vote yes or have a little rainbow on it. And there are hundreds of those. There's so many. But there's only one that says it's okay to vote no. And I used that profile filter and she saw it and she didn't like it.
And then we saw Aussie tennis champion Margaret Court's treatment on Channel 10's current affair panel show The Project. That had my fucking blood boiling.
I think, you know, I may have been a tennis champion, but even as a young person, I'd agree that marriage is between a man and a woman. If people read the first
I appreciate that might be your view,
can
but
I just
there is polling.
Can I finish?
I need to pick you up on this point, though, because there is polling suggesting that 62 to 64% are in support of this. So you can have your view, but you can't change those facts.
She was just telling you her views, you smarmy little fuckhead. She was literally telling you her views when you had to cut her off and pick her up on the fact that different people have different views.
Anything that Christians or non-Christians say about marriage at the moment, they are being bullied and they're being intimidated. And I think we do have a view. We're not being allowed to say why we really believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. And I have nothing against homosexual people. They can lead their life, but don't touch marriage. And
Margaret,
it's
if I
covenant.
could just...
You see, and,
no, I don't think you and I
make
agree on a lot of
joke
things, including what's funny. But
yeah, I know.
Also,
I know.
I mean, do you understand how hurtful it is for LGBTQI Australians when someone of your stature sort of actively promotes the idea that they're not equal to you, that you're better than them and deserve more?
They can lead. I don't agree with you on that. I'm not saying I'm better than them.
But you deserve marriage and they don't, is what you're saying.
Between a man and... Well, it is, because it's in the Bible. And because the Bible says it, and
but
it's
we're
in
a
the
secular
beginning
society,
when God
Margaret.
created man.
I'm not a Christian person.
Listen, thunder cunt, I wouldn't call myself a Christian person either, but that doesn't illegitimise the opinion of someone who does consider themselves to be a Christian. You arrogant cunts have invited her onto your show to share her views, and when she does just that, you interrupt her, you disrespect her, and you ridicule her, as if her view on the matter is objectively wrong and yours is objectively right. That's incredibly ugly and self-righteous, and unfortunately, it's an attitude held by an overwhelming number of Yes campaigners.
Mentally deficient / retarded / dripping with autism, just spewing out of everywhere. God knows where this autism's coming out of. From God knows where, so fucking spraying out of your ears. It's embarrassing to hear.
The AFL has taken a huge step in its support of marriage equality by replacing its logo with a yes sign at the league's headquarters in Melbourne. But not everyone's happy about it. Clubs, fans and some of the sport's biggest names say the AFL should not get involved. Premiership coach Mick Malthouse is calling them out, saying, quote, the AFL will only polarise people and really has no right to be involved in the political world